Welcome to the NEREJ NYREJ podcast. I'm your host, Rick Kaplan. Today's podcast is sponsored by Cassidy Paving. Contact Cassidy Paving at CassidyPaving.com for all your paving needs. To be a sponsor on our podcast, contact me at rkaplan at NEREJ.com. To get today's guest, I've known him for quite a long time now. It is Matt Shortsleeve, and he is with Solect Energy. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Good morning, Rick. Good to be here.
Well, Matt, tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, sure. Well, I've been in renewables here in New England for about 16 years, with Select the last 12 years. Um, but it was to get into the business. It was a career crossroads moment for me. I had been in printing, digital document management. I worked at Kinko's and then at Staples for about 14 or 15 years. And we had gone through a big acquisition and merger. And like many things, my path changed. So I thought about what I might do next. And this was right around the time that the green communities were being reviewed and implemented here in Massachusetts. Really established a renewable energy framework and kicked off the solar energy program. So that's what's brought me to Select today.
So you started, was that like the beginning of the solar industry, or that was just when it started to pop?
Probably the latter, because, solar panels have been in use since the 50s. But commercial uptake was really, it was policy driven with the investment tax credit in the late 90s. And then it took Massachusetts establishing I think it was the Massachusetts Tech Collaborative, MTC. It was an office that was kind of the precursor to the Clean Energy Center. And they had created some rebate funds to try to get large users to switch to renewable energy through solar. But when the Green Communities Acts of 2008 under Deval Patrick and then Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray and Secretary of Energy Ian Bowles were implemented, that created the SREC program. So for many years, there had been a renewable portfolio standard. And, that allows for the creation of Class 1 renewable energy certificates for renewable energy generation or RECs. And they carved out a program within that, called it the Solar Renewable Energy Credit, or an SREC. And that's what really kicked off the uptake.
So are companies using solar as their sole energy for their company, or do they have to have a mix of different type of sources?
It really depends on the property and its energy use intensity and its area for solar, or very few other renewable generation sources. We're starting to see some geothermal for heating and cooling, but that needs electricity to run on. So the real generation source, solar has been the workhorse. And
Uh,
depending
Well,
on the building type, we have tall, small roof buildings that can't host a lot in, say, the, central business districts. And then we have kind of the suburban office and commercial spaces, and you can put an awful lot of generation capacity on those. And further out you get, of course, you've got institutional warehousing, and now their electricity use is increasing, but it's mostly for storage, so it's less intensive per foot. And those can often have, you know, projects that would generate in excess of what they need on site.
no, I talk to a lot of people in general, but I have people that have come up to me and had said, had questions about solar and different energy sources and things of that nature. One of the things that they always ask about in New England here, we have the change of weather. Is it viable to have a solar energy for them?
Yeah. I mean, the sun shines fewer hours in the winter, and sometimes it's covered with snow and ice. But over the course of a year, it's absolutely the really most efficient, lowest cost technology to deliver electricity to a property or even just feed up to the grid. And if you can put it in the ground, like a ground mounted system, you can get a steeper pitch and the snow slides off. It gets more, energy production because of its angle southerly.
Well, I always use the pitch for you that I watch a lot of these homesteader TV shows, and all of them use solar. I said, and the weather where they are usually is not the best weather in the world. It's either very cold and snowy, and this is their main source of energy. So it must work seasonal. It's not a one season type energy. It's year round.
Yeah. And all the state incentive programs are for projects that are interconnected to the grid so that the grid becomes the kind of backup, the secondary source. And that allows for continuity. You can run, but you can't hide when it comes to paying the electric bill, but you can certainly hedge quite a bit. And there's a lot of good policy out there that allows for the rollover from a productive month to a less productive month. Think about public schools. Many of them have more production in their solar array in the summer months with less activity. And then that kind of balances out throughout the course of the school year so that by next spring, they should be back towards getting almost all, if not all, of their electricity from that solar project.
Well, I can tell you, I never think about public school, so that's not that's not in my mind ever. Uh, I'm just curious on how much money a year would be on the average. Let's say someone that has a 30,000 square foot building and they have solar. About how much money do they really save on their energy costs on average?
Interesting, you should ask. Well, there are a couple answers, and I think it depends on how it's financed, if they're using the energy. And we actually have some estimates we were just working on because of um, the change in the ITC after the 4th of July. But I'll say this, that we looked at, yeah, a system about that size, a purchase in 20 years. So the panels are warranted for 25 years, but in Massachusetts, the Solar Smart program has a 20-year term. So if you're awarded a smart um, project and there's excess capacity, they're available to qualified projects, the project owner would net about $1.5 million over 20 years on that 250 kilowatt system.
Quite a bit of a savings.
It's significant.
Yeah.
And it's, we'll talk more today, I believe, about more than kind of savings, but there's a compliance aspect of this that's becoming more prevalent in more cities and states. And these asset owners and property managers are now reporting, their energy and commodity use. And we've seen this movie before. We think we know which way it's headed. If you're keenly and painfully aware of Birdo and Buedo, and for our owners in New York, the local Law 97. and what this means for the compliance or non-compliance, there's a big financial impact there too.
Now, you know, this day and age, there's almost all kinds of incentives for people to kind of lean more to energy saving for their properties or even appliances that they use in their business. Uh, it, what are some of the incentives that the federal government and well, in Massachusetts, let's use that for an example. So Massachusetts and federal government, is there some kind of incentive for a business owner to go the solar route?
Yeah, and it works for whether you're a business owner looking to, use that solar energy to run your operation, or if you're a property owner and you want to maximize the utilization and, profitability. Um, at the federal level, there's been a federal investment tax credit. We've just entered the third phase of its sunsetting period, so it is fleeting, and there's depreciation. Combined, they're over 50% of the project cost. Without the ITC, the investment tax credit, then just depreciation at, 100% of the project's basis, and then your federal tax rate, say 21%. So, a system like we just looked at that saves you $1.5 million, or the kind of the net benefit. It's not just savings, but the state program actually sends you checks. They're getting the federal benefit of, investing and owning the system. So that's a tax credit and the depreciation. And if they're using the energy, that's electricity they're not buying through the utility. Delivered electricity is really expensive and it's volatile and it's trending up. In August, this was in this morning's Globe. It was a consumer residential article, but Hiawatha Bray is a Boston, Globe journalist or contributor. And in August, rates go up about 1.5 cents. That's just supply. The delivery side is, think infrastructure. Think how expensive that is when you get it rationed out per kilowatt hour. So that the avoided cost, if you're using the electricity, is a real good benefit because the fuel for solar is free. That's different than gas. And then finally, there's a state incentive program here. It's called SMART. It's entering its kind of third iteration, started in 2018. And it pays the system owner for every kilowatt hour they generate, whether they're using that electricity or it's going straight up to the grid. They pay them an incentive in cents per kilowatt hour. Like every quarter, a check comes through or direct payment. That's 20 years. Boy, you can bring that to the bank and finance a solar project at your commercial property. Those together, if you can get in time for the tax credit, use that depreciation and, get a SMART award, it's 4 to 5 years break even on your investment. And if you lever it with bank debt, the cash flow is great. They're really solid investments. Massachusetts is really determined to get folks to switch to renewables, and we feel like solar is the best candidate from a speed to deploy, cost to deploy, and it's predictable, financeable benefits. So it's kept me here over 12 years, Rick. I mean, we're still going strong. It's a
Well,
little up and down,
and
but
so
it's been really
you've
good.
seen some of the differences. Like you go back, I don't know, what maybe 15 years ago, the incentives were different. The product was different. So there was a lot of changes in the 15 years, and people were using less energy 15 years ago. you know? So, I mean, now with the increase in the amount of energy you need, because almost everything is run by electricity, things that people were doing manually years ago. Now they're running with electricity. Yeah, you talk about being in the printing business and things like that. I mean, years ago, a lot of that stuff was they did some of it manually, and then they had some equipment come in, and now it's all electric, digital and run by electricity. So most companies have to use electricity. And with the incentives they gave years ago, it made a lot of sense back then. Now, the savings they're getting from just using the solar is incredible.
We
But
think of this in terms of like a double trouble. Electrification has led to increased electric use, right? Heating and cooling, process, machines, certainly plug power, computing. I mean, everyone talks about data centers. Our office electricity use is up because we're using AI with our, applications, and um, it is the increase is, well, at a market level, ISO New England, who, oversees the wholesale transmission system, is forecasting load growth, so more electric use. And that's the first time in like 20 years that this has been kind of a phenomenon in our market because energy efficiency has been so successful. Think about lighting and, the now the adoption of, well, electric heating and cooling, electric transportation is just increasing. So that's the first barrel. And then the second is the costs. The, I was looking at the ISO New England app this morning, and still like 60% is being powered by gas. Today, that gas is cheap. Today, on July 27th, it's like under $4. But it was close to $100 2 weeks ago. So the wholesale volatility on the supply side is leading to increased consumer prices, whether you have a business meter or a residential meter. Now, smart folks get out in front of this. They buy electricity from a third-party supplier and they manage it very aggressively. About half of the commercial market uses a third-party supplier. The other half are just kind of subject to that grid-delivered pass-through, baseline power, basic service. So with increased use and increased pricing, it's like, whoop, it's an unholy curve. So you got to take some action to try to get out in front of that. And we don't want, our businesses leaving. We want to be competitive. We can't make it too hard for businesses to be, behind lower energy cost states. Think of the Carolinas and Texas, and we've lost some businesses over the years to those lower industrial cost places. Now, I think Massachusetts is a great place to run a business. Got a terrific market. You've got a terrific, smart, educated, hardworking workforce, innovation, education, but it's a real pressure. And, I think it's up to the state to continue to be proactive and make things as affordable as possible so businesses can, pay the taxes and make these communities as long, sustaining, excellent places to live and work and raise a family.
now, would you say that solar is the most stable cost of, uh, of energy out there? Because there's really no ups and downs, like you were saying.
I think that it's the fastest to deploy, right? The installer community here can help companies get solar on their properties. We're coming up over 1,000 projects that we've completed here at Select over the last 16 years. The fuel is free. And so I really appreciate this Massachusetts Governor Healy's administration, who says solar is the fastest and cheapest generating resource for Massachusetts, and we want to support the deployment. So I'm all for it. I think as far as the lowest cost, you're thinking longer term, levelized cost of energy, but fuel is volatile. Developing a new nuclear reactor is complex, risky, expensive. It takes a long time and it's controversial, right? It's going to take a common vote in Massachusetts to override the moratorium on new uh, nuclear. So, and a business doesn't need something like that. I mean, when we're talking to your customers, your subscribers and readers, they're thinking about their portfolio of properties or maybe the one building they have. They're not thinking about building infrastructure for the grid. So when you think about it from a, building or portfolio perspective, solar is absolutely eligible and effective and proven. So we feel good about that.
Yeah, no, the thing with the wind farms, now that's was a disaster.
Oh
And
yeah.
the people that live down in the islands and the Cape, uh, they just cannot they can't wait till they tear these wind farms down because they're dangerous for one thing, and what they tell me is most of the time they're not even working. So I mean that was a source of energy that they were planning on it, but was not a reliable source of energy. And that's where I go back to solar is being a reliable source of energy. You put it on there, it's going to work. Could work for whatever, 100 years, whatever. As long as we have the sun up there, you know, and that's not going anywhere. So, you went, one thing that we talked about this, I don't know, the last time I saw you, which was probably a few years ago, we talked about the solar farms. Because people will driving along the highways now and they see lines of solar panels like looking like a farm. It's a bunch of land that's all solar panels, and that's something that your company does, right? Correct?
We do.
Yeah. That is used for mainly municipalities.
Well, a couple thoughts on that. One is I think many municipalities signed up for the bill credits to be the off-taker of that energy, but those farms feed the grid and that delivers, you know, power to the distribution system. And instead of just selling it directly to the utilities, which has the benefit of the utilities don't have to pay to the demand charges to bring that power into their service area. So they have a big avoided cost. In fact, the municipal light plants in Massachusetts have done very well with solar farms in their service areas. And when they're properly sited, I cannot state how important it is to be responsible with siting and that we don't have a lot of acreage in Massachusetts. And while some crops can coexist, forests coming down for solar farms, maybe not the best idea. Um, but the real benefit that we've seen with municipalities is when you put a solar project on the roof, or it can go in the ground, behind the property, or in a parking lot. The parking canopies are so cool. They give shade. They get rid of heat island. It's a great place to charge your cars. They're expensive, but man, they are a great property amenity, and you get kind of dual use. Get to park there and use it for an energy generator. Um, when you consume that electricity behind your meter at your property, oh man, it's got an extra benefit. Um, you can bet that today's electricity prices delivered through the grid are going to increase over time. And if you can avoid that by making and consuming at your site, that's a great thing. The projects that feed the grid directly are great too. They're necessary, especially when they're responsibly sited. But they don't deliver the same financial benefit to the energy off-taker as a project that they're building because there's no avoided cost. And that's a huge aspect of the long-term benefit of on-site solar. So they're both necessary. We think the on-sites just consistently deliver great savings to the business owner.
I've seen quite a few of these garages built built up like in company parking lots.
Oh yeah.
And at the top of the garage is all the solar panels. And I said, boy, that's a great idea, because now you can go to work in the middle of a snowstorm, park in the garage. Now your car's not going to get covered with the snow, and you're generating the energy
Yeah.
on the top of that building, which I don't see why more companies don't do that. They have these huge parking lots. It would make a
Yeah,
lot of
lots
sense.
and garages, as you say. We just did a public safety complex it was a build out new building. So that was easy because wasn't easy, but it wasn't a retrofit, structural design kind of ground up. We knew that the third floor was going to be covered in about 600 kilowatts of panels. And that city is doing two more with us, retrofits. We were doing some with another city, up in the Merrimack, and we did a private college when they decided to add a parking deck to their existing garage, put a nice big array up there. It's, I mean, great sun, no shade up there. Nobody's complaining about like that looks industrial. Like I haven't heard that in a long time.
Right.
Um, and just a great amenity, and it's just out of the way, right? It's easy to maintain. We get up there on a scissor lift. Um, and they're really highly productive. That's responsible siting. And in Massachusetts, there's an extra incentive to put solar above parking because it's a dual use and it's better than developing a green field, right? For just an energy project. If you have to develop a green field, let's see how much value we can get out of it. So that's why rooftop is incentive and solar parking canopies are too.
Well, also now you have so many electric cars on the road. It becomes a source of, fueling up their vehicles as well.
It
You
sure
know,
is. Yeah.
I mean, I was at Trillium, the brewery in Canton. They had to have probably over 30 or 40 charging stations
Teslas.
in the parking lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they charge those, what energy source they use, but it's probably not, I would say they probably have solar somewhere supplying the energy to those.
If it's Trillium, I might have to go inspect myself and see what's going on down there. That's a great spot.
Yeah.
They did a nice
And
job with that property.
and a lot of land. So they have plenty of room for a solar, a little solar farm right there.
Oh yeah, kind of at that Canton, Blue Hills,
Yeah. And
Royal, right?
you get that account and you can visit them once a week, you know.
Yeah, and then Beth Israel's got the properties right up the street and the former Reebok campus.
Yeah.
That's a good area
Yeah,
for it
that
too.
whole area in there. Dunkin' Donuts was in there. I think they're still in there. Yeah. But uh, baby, you brought up hospitals. Is and you say, oh, industrial, it looks too industrial, They got so many things on the roof of their building. I don't even think people would know. That would be covering up all the other stuff that's
Right, right.
uh,
Be like a
but
beauty
it'd be a
job.
great source of energy for them.
We're hopeful to be announcing a medical center campus full of canopies and garage tops soon. Um, Look, it's just too expensive. Is healthcare expensive and rising? Are the costs to power those campuses, these high-tech, electric intensive locations, expensive? Of course they are. we're gonna, what are we doing about it kind of across the economy? And there's a great opportunity. We've seen them at, I think it's the Harrington Hospital has a big array. Um, and when you think about the energy intensity, I mean, those are places that, and senior housing, right? Um, Nursing homes, senior facilities, how critical they are to be temperature controlled and predictable. I mean, how do you put a price on that? I guess you have to. But what you really need to do is encourage them to, pull less demand out of the grid, try to not cause infrastructure upgrades. We know we need infrastructure upgrades on the grid, but let's not, let's use what we can. Let's use the sites that we can to put distributed generation resources. That should keep the strain down and really only require that infrastructure upgrade for, substations that really need it. Let's get the most out of what we have and not burden, whether it's energy ratepayers, or here's another one. When we put in solar projects at a building, there's often a big utility bill that comes with it. They want, gold plate that system, put all the latest and greatest protections on there, and it can be expensive, and that can have an impact on the return on investment. What's the capital to get this project built? What are they going to save over time? And then when we look at infrastructure costs, maybe some of that build out at the site, can be minimized with energy rates. But maybe the utility should be bearing the cost of that infrastructure that they're going to, pick up and utilize for the next 50 years. So there's some rate redesign work at the DPU. It's more like long-term system planning docket. And that has everything to do with, okay, we're going to have to build out. How do we do this, equitably, and what's fair and what's not going to prevent more distributed resources to come online? So there's a lot of people working on this. We're
Yeah.
trying to stay relevant and really provide information at the project level. We see some doozies that come to get these things interconnected, but we've made good progress lately to let what, kind of the size of the building, most buildings, what do they use? We've created a new pathway for them to get interconnected, hopefully not get stuck behind these big group studies and slow them down and add all these costs. We're working at it.
Well, I think nowadays solar is more mainstream than it was years ago. I mean, I see even some of the signage on the roads that have, some kind of lighting in it. They have a solar panel attached to it. So it's very mainstream now. And one of the things that I'm curious about is that I don't see a lot of it in multifamily projects, which some of these multifamily projects have a lot of rooftop space, as well as parking space that they can build those under the garage with the solar panels on it.
Mhm.
Is that something that you think there's going to be a growth to? People are going to start doing that? I have seen a couple.
Yeah, I think what's held it back is policy and building design and individual ownership of a lot of those units. So when you think about policy, it's okay, where can we get the most bang for the buck? If the state's going to offer an incentive program, where will we get the most uptake? And then secondly, those buildings have been designed, a lot of the multi-units have been designed, with curb appeal and attractive roof lines. And that doesn't make for like a nice flat or southerly pitched, roof. It's got dormers and they're broken up, and the cost of installing something that's in multiple pieces and a lot of connection points and not as much generation just inherently is going to cost more and yield a little less energy. And then the ownership or even the rules of like associations, you got to get everybody to say yes. And then they may individually pay those electric bills. And do you just put one on my, unit and not one over here? So those are really the three I've observed. There is help on the way. The current energy legislation in Massachusetts, one bill's been passed by the House, one bill passed last month or earlier this month in the Senate, and now there's a conference committee try to make the sausage and come away with something that works for everybody, I guess. Um, there is language in there to create more compensation for and potentially some grant funding for multifamily, like more than 4 units. And then I think the last piece is that this is around whether it's stretch code adoption, depending on the community that it's in, they're going to be net zero. It's going to be passive house. It's going to be on-site self-generation. It's going to have some resiliency aspects. The economics so overwhelmingly pan out to build to the higher standard. Like, I'm not sure of a use case in Massachusetts that, build to R20 or R30 makes sense, right? You got to be 60 or better. And, your energy intensity is a lot lower. And so, when you take that kind of first pass of construction finance, that's one ingredient to the project economics. But as we've seen in, many chapters of the commercial real estate cycles that, interest rates and uh, asset utilization, rent trends. I mean, look at the demand for conversion to residential. But we saw a building on Thorndike in Cambridge sell for $1 last month. Assumption of about 230 million in debt.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, well, operating that building is going to really have a big input to, what was that price, right? If that was a super efficient building to operate, maybe that, could have been a little bit higher, demanded a higher price at sale. So we think that housing and other building types are going to get a little bit more, whether it's optionality and incentives with carrots, or if it's going to be mandates through like, the likes of Birdo or what we might see occur with the large building energy reporting, statewide for buildings over 20,000 feet. You're going to have to power it electrically with renewables. And thankfully, the SMART program really makes that palatable financially.
So you think that it's coming along? That's going to be like the next big thing, spot for solar is going to be the multifamily.
I think that it's going to be covered. It'll be included. But there's something that comes in this legislation that, incentivizes and then obliges them. So, the developers, whether you're going ground up or renovate, or if you're, an asset owner, property manager, you're going to have to you're going to have to create some electric generation for those properties. The low income multifamilies have had incentive over the years. We think it's going into market level as well, just generally at the building number of units. At the state level, think about the MBTA Communities Act, and you're obliging towns to adopt multi-unit housing. Well, it's got a pencil for the developer. And one way is a nice efficient energy system. So the operating expenses are low and maybe they can be more competitive on the rents. Maybe they can make a little extra on the return on investment.
You talk about the MBTA. I know I drive by once in a while. There's a garage in Hingham that has the solar panels. Now, I'm not sure. I can't believe the solar panels are running the train, but they are they? But they're probably using it for their common areas, I would think, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that particular property, but I know that no, the trains, the commuter rails are not electric. I mean, I cover my face when I get out of that because it's just you're just huffing bad stuff. Um, but as a state agency, the authority is subject to Executive Order 594. They have to decarbonize their operations. That was under Charlie Baker. And there are grant programs to support those, right? To kind of lower the cost of the installation. We've been lucky to do a bunch of state level projects, different authorities, different agencies. Um, and I mean, we all pay into public education. Let's make public education affordable. We all pay into public transportation. Let's make transportation
Right.
affordable. We're not doing, locomotive electric engines yet here at Select, but we do have a basement workshop. Maybe we could put that in the pipeline. Uh, no,
Hey,
but the use of the building, whether that's maintenance equipment or their electric fleet, of vehicles needs charging. So where's that going to come from? Yeah, it's pretty pervasive, Rick. We feel like you mentioned earlier that it's gone kind of mainstream. We think that's the case.
so Matt, we talked about Massachusetts, and obviously you work all over New England and New York, correct? You work in New
That's
York,
right.
New Jersey. You go into
Yeah,
a lot,
we've
New
done
Jersey.
several projects in New Jersey, and it may be a state in our future.
Yeah. So they all have their own state policies for the utilities as well as the solar. Is there one state that has a better incentive plan than another in New England?
It's interesting because, Connecticut passed a new law just at the end of June to continue their solar program through 2035. So it's working and it needs improvement and we'll work on that. But that program is a good program and it's very similar to the Massachusetts Smart Program. Um, but it's not just incentives to get solar on the grid, it's also, how do we make sure that energy storage can play an important role? It's a great complementary technology. And how do we plan for that? And then I mentioned earlier about interconnecting to the grid. That process needs modernization in most jurisdictions. So the policy coverage through, the departments of public utilities, that's one whole set of work. But the energy offices, like the Department of Energy Resources in Massachusetts, or NYSERDA in New York, um, the OER in Rhode Island, they create these incentive compensation programs for different technologies. And some are better than others. There's no doubt about it. And I think it's a matter of most states now are getting on board with, after feeling the energy shocks of this summer and last winter, like the more distributed renewables we have, the lower the cost of grid upgrades, the lower the cost of wholesale power. And then we see the utilities, who are always important partners at the policy table, they operate in multiple states, like national grids in New York and Massachusetts. So we are working across those policy teams to try to have consistency. Eversource operates in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. And they want to have as similar programs as possible to administer, for consistency. And imagine being a business owner. I've got a building in Worcester and one in Hartford and one in New Hampshire. It could be three completely different journeys today,
Right.
and they'll have their process, but the rules, the compensation, market information seems to be increasingly similar, and that should make it easier for multi-property owners to, plan for their portfolios and for us as a practitioner to have some predictability about where we could invest in our business to help really, building owners and businesses, take advantage of solar and storage. So we're seeing some things that are working. The New York program's really good. The Connecticut program's pretty good. Hopefully getting better. Massachusetts has a great program. They've done a terrific job. Here's where they benefit the most. They've been convening these stakeholder groups, and we've gotten a lot of participation. So the lawmakers, the regulators, they can implement policies that make sense. And not everybody's 100% getting what they want every time, but we're moving the ball down the field. And that's, it's important that, it's not a win or lose situation, that it's like, how do we make sure that we can be competitive? We're not overspending on these programs, but we're giving, tools to the businesses and buildings owners so that they can really be competitive.
Well, unfortunately, Matt, we're coming close to the end of the show. But if someone was interested in finding out more information or even information about putting the solar in their property, is there a website that they can go to?
Yeah, you can certainly visit us at solect.com, solect.com. It would be a couple good, helpful places to visit. One is the Department of Energy Resources, the large building energy reporting. All the big building owners know about it, but there are some good guides on there. We're out at events. We've got a show in Boston this week. And you can follow us. We have a good blog, a good policy blog at select.com. It's called Spark. And we try to provide updates, like we're about to publish the ITC Phase 3. So, what does that tax credit mean to a solar project? And when could I act to try to capture that? So those are a couple of locations we think that would be useful. We're always trying to inform, educate, answer questions. So they, feel like, okay, if we're going to work with someone, let's work with someone who knows what they're talking about and has a long track record of delivering and doing what's right for the customer.
Well, I'll also mention that some of the information in your contact will probably be added to our profile of the show so that people can look at it on all the podcasting platforms that we're on, as well as on YouTube, and they can get a hold of you. Matt, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I'm glad you came on the show, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon, somewhere or somehow.
Rick, thanks so much. And you guys do such a great job. Thanks for all you're doing for the market. Really important work, and pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the other things I want to mention is that, I know, like I said at the beginning of the show, I've known Matt Shortsleeve. I've known him for quite a while, and also the company Solect Energy. And I can't say enough about this company. The company is extraordinary in what they do, and they specialize in the solar as well as for industrial use. So it's not like that you're doing industrial, residential, and all these other things. You specialize for commercial use mainly.
Correct.
So, and they do an excellent job. Again, thank you, Matt. I appreciate you coming on the show. We're talking with Matt Shortsleeve. He's with Solect Energy. And I want to thank everyone for listening. You're listening to the NEREJ NYREJ Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Kaplan. Today's podcast is sponsored by Cassidy Paving. Contact Cassidy Paving at CassidyPaving.com for all your paving needs. To be a sponsor on our podcast, contact me at rkaplan@nerej.com. Until next time.